might almost say that we're somewhat addicted to it. People didn't used to be like that. Thousands of years ago, 4,000 of years ago, maybe for most of the time that we've been on the planet, we're looking for intercessors with the forces we didn't understand. We offered sacrifices, prayed, magic, religion. All this went on for, our whole history until, a few hundred years ago, during the Enlightenment. And then we began to think that we could have some control over our lives, over our destiny, and different ways of looking at our life experience and the world around us. And one of the, I think, it was interesting what happened. I mean, the idea of being in charge is terrific. Who doesn't want to be in charge of their life? That feels great. What happened as a corollary with this was the idea that everything is, if we can fix everything, that means everything is like a machine. So things became more and more like a machine. The Earth, everything in its orbit. We no longer had the beautiful angels and spirits and heavens and stars. There was a beautiful cosmology prior to this that inflamed imagination and inspiration. And now we're, very much more mechanistic that came along with that. And then didn't stop there. People, then it was our bodies. Well, how do you find and probe and dig around and get everything sorted out and connected, and where can we go in, and all that. That was medicine. And then didn't stop there. It went right into our psyches. And you can fix everything. Just find the right neuron, the right pathway, the right drug. And then it's, extended into our social ills, the sociology, everything goes along. So just big fixer-upper. And so here we are in what seems to be an enormous mess with the climate. And we listened to a talk about the climate justice the other night. An excellent talk and discussion, a presentation about it. And one thing that really struck me in listening to, it was Lindsay, who's a, globally connected expert on this subject. And the language she used was quite different. There wasn't this sense of fixing. Sometimes things are just too big to think about fixing. Sometimes we can't fix. And there's lots of reasons for that. One reason, it's good to know situations that you can't fix. For example, to give you a new example, a situation that you can easily fix. You've got a fire on your stove. You grab the fire extinguisher, you put out the fire. That's simple. You know what that is. Okay? There's a direct linear causation there. Cause and effect. You know exactly what to do. Most of what we're living is not like that. Most of what we're living, we don't really know the causes of this. We can see sometimes, because you're doing this, that's happening, of course, but why are we doing that? And how can you fix it? And you can't really use that model because there's so many moving pieces and so many different parts. And that's why Lindsay never gave us a clear answer on what do we do. We asked her several times, well, what can we do right now? And she's going, well, more like you kind of have to figure that out for yourself. And it was really vague. We expect someone who's an expert to say, if everyone does this and this and this, the problem is going to be sorted. But this isn't like that. This is a very complex. And so her language was quite different. For example, the word justice. There are many different kinds of justice. I can't even remember all. There's a climate justice and social justice and gender justice and I think racial justice. I even saw a video about epistemic justice. So justice, there's the feeling about justice is that things are the way they're supposed to be. We have a sense of how things are supposed to be, and that feels right. There's that sense of justice that we feel worthwhile, that everybody's getting what they deserve, that things are being taken care of. And so this word justice sort of encapsulates a general feeling of rightness. And when we connect to that feeling and connect to that word, you can see that it involves everything. It involves all those different entangled and very complex pieces that make up, our climate emergency. Everything is connected. And she talked about the importance of bringing us all together, bringing people together into groups, into circles outside, sharing stories that are connected with this feeling of justice. What does justice feel like? What are our stories about it? And from that place of moorings, that was the word she used, moorings, where you have a sense of being heard, listened to, valued, a sense of being worthwhile. In ourselves, we have that feeling, and we want to extend it to others. And there's a flow, right? And a sense of justice for everyone. And that's the different approach. I feel like we're moving beyond that mechanistic. Okay, let's read the diagnoses. Let's get in there with our screwdrivers, take everything apart. That's not working now. So as human beings together here on this planet, this beautiful planet, together here, we're moving into you say it's complex. It's complex. What can hold all that complexity? What can embrace it? How can we move around it? That's what we're finding out right now, here and now, in this moment. That's how we're moving forward together with feelings of warm, positive regard for each other, for the planet, for all the pieces, for everything that's moving and living together. Justice.
Just take out that little bit. But I think that you're approaching it like we get to approach it. Because we know we connect to justice and we don't have to worry about societal justice. Like we do, as women we do. But that's secondary, and we've been conditioned through mass media and commercials and just our roles in the society to be able to understand that and keep chugging. Whereas we still have more justices of various kinds available to us. So we can focus. It's like the hierarchy of needs. And so we can focus on the Gaia's aspect of this. But there's something that's interesting to know. And I say this because it's almost like a segue. Canada has a shortage of doctors. And it takes 11 years to train a doctor. Canada has known since the Kyoto Treaty that it had to take and suppress its carbon emissions. And it means well. You know this. It's in every way, shape, or form to be a good Canadian. I'm not talking about the MP that pegged a finger last night. I'm talking about, we know as Canadians and as people who are trying to be Canadians what you want to embrace as a society as what's important to a good life. And the problem is people are over inundated with complex problems that humans weren't created to handle. So you say there's solutions. There was once a time when science ruled, and the laboratory that is now somebody's computer desktop was a physical laboratory. And we could do the laws of physics, right? All the thermodynamic laws, energy laws. There was that caveat where E equals mc squared, which had the spooky moment at a distance, where we couldn't explain that. But we had most of it tacked down, moored. Once you threw a drug war and a war and another war, and you videoed it and you wrote about it and you made everybody in the world abreast. Not within 18 days when the train got to the other side of the country. You're living it live, real, tormented, graphically, and people are exhausted. And they're not capable for the mentally. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, I would love to be socially just, but I can't handle the drain. It's just, where do you begin? Do you start with the puppies? Do you start with the flooding? Do you start with the earthquake? Do you start with the children that can't read? Do you start with the drug crisis? Do you start with So people are trying to find what garden they can bloom in and feeling very dissected. And the problem with this is political. Because there are places, if we would listen, that put people in floating houses in Denmark because of flooding. Those chains, they hold the house there, that comes up on buoyant floats and goes back down. But people aren't, it takes a long time to turn the Titanic around. And you do have one province that's like Texas that will keep this going to the very bitter end. And we've seen this throughout history. It'll come to me, who said if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. There are ship's captain's logs of going to Easter Island in the 1600s, in the 1500s, where it was full and jungly and beautiful. And there had to be somebody who saw that last tree go into a kayak or canoe to get them out of there that said, well, so we have to understand that people don't always do the right thing, and inundated, socially unjust people where we've put a melting pot where there never was one. People lived tribally. You lived in your village, you visited this village, there was a connection, people knew people, your last name was your job. You know, when we changed all that and we fractionated people, that social justice is, to me, after teaching environmental science to everybody for 13 years, I think it's the romanticism that I see in Elizabeth Barrett. I feel like you're right. It almost makes me cry, because the shoulder that you have to pour that world problem on is so heavy right now, and there's too much head in the sand blind ignorance that we're running into a wall. My hope, and it's a lot like listening to can't think of her name. Oh my God. The lady in the forest, and the girl is, and the monkeys, and she's wonderful, and she's 90, and can't think of her.
Yeah.
And the guy
Jane.
Goodall.
Yes.
And then the man that you don't particularly care for, but I don't like Neil deGrasse.
Justin Peterson.
He's on Vancouver Island. He used to have an environmental show. His daughter's taken it over.
Oh, David Suzuki.
Yes.
You don't.
The thing that he did was say, can it be the children? The thing that she said is, can it be the children? And what I do see is I had a student, and this is going back years now, who would take everybody's plastic bottles and put them in her backpack to go recycle them, because nobody would in the classroom. And I know somebody who's bringing up a child right now that is extremely environmental aware, and her hero is Greta, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that this is going to be our ability. I don't know how it's going to roll. I hope that you're right. I hope that we can, as humans, shoulder the responsibility of being socially, environmentally, criminally, ethically just, but I don't see that now. And that hurts me because, as you know, I have grandchildren. I have taught for a long time. How do we teach people who don't really want to know? And I say this kindly. I have friends who don't want to know. Please don't tell me the news. La, la, la. They don't want to hear it because it's too harsh. And I don't think we're built as humans to take that kind of barrage. But I agree with you. You bring up good darn points.
Thanks, Sharri. Thank you very much.
That's coming out. I also attended. Thank you, Laurel. That was a good reflection. And I talked to a few people afterwards because I asked a question and didn't get a direct answer. Someone else did, and now you've put it in context that we're not out to fix things, but to come together in some way that will make a difference. I talked to George, and he thought this whole issue of taking small steps for climate recovery, and she had 3 areas in her work, and she took the third one, the environmental justice, but the first one was preventative, stopping the fuel emissions in whatever way, big picture. And then the second one, if I remember correctly, was to manage what we've got going on right now. So some of the examples in Vancouver that she showed was the cold water shelter, for hot weather, cold drink shelters that they've provided, and just dealing with these unpredictable, now common environmental issues. So what's stopping? For me, my question was kind of going to a lot of what we're using in our households. And it doesn't have to be just women, of course, but it's people who are in the domestic fields, which most of them are women, how can they sort of boycott products that we know are bad for the environment? Like, can't we empower people to stand up to this? And George's response made me think. He said, economics. If it's cheaper to buy this product than another product, people are really strapped and they'll go for the cheaper one. So to me, I think a lot of it is economics. I've always thought about personal behavior, personal choices, become aware and take action. And it's not always possible for people, and that's maybe where the justice piece comes in. Maybe things are just too expensive for the average person. Maybe, the products can be more regulated. But my heart and mind went to people who are managing households and families. I know there's all these different layers of activism, but my heart goes to those that are every day trying to do the best they can. And so education, support, perhaps, economic support, and maybe government regulation. That's sort of what I'm thinking.
Because I have some thought about that. You said the word strapped, and I liked that word because it isn't just economic. It's strapped for time. It's strapped for gasoline. It's strapped for a babysitter. It's strapped for being able to take the time to do the research or dig and find out how much would it cost. I'll give you an example. So we had a conversation after going to Costa Rica. I noticed that everything you buy is in a package that is like a plastic bag. Here's your milk. Here's your laundry detergent. 2 plastic bags. And they go home and put into containers. And it was to stop the boxing, the packaging, the plasticking that comes, with the ties and everything. But here's the thing. We tried to do that. So we got rid of our car. We got rid of our hot tub. We put our footprint down from a 3,000 square foot house on 2 acres. We're living in this little thing. But one of the things that we couldn't make the jump on was these tabs. And we were talking about it amongst ourselves as a family and cousins. There are these laundry tabs that they talk about, because if you buy any cleaner that's economically feasible, you're left over with a huge gallon of plastic that goes into the landfill, right? And we know that that's absolutely going to take 100+ years, and it will never, ever, ever break down into something natural because it was made from oil and processed in a lab. So it's never going to go into anything but bits of microplastic in the soil. We know that. But will it stop you when that's $7.99, but the tabs that you're going to do your laundry with, that need a booster, by the way, are going to cost you twice that easily for a little less amount of washing? And as much as your heart might want it, it's really hard to make that decision. And while there'll always be this thing where CIOs and CEOs, for as long as we are still in this robber-baron relationship that was much like the turn of the century, the 1900s, it's what Charles Dickens wrote about. We're in this tug-of-war with our knowledge now, our guilt for what we could possibly do, research, become. And I think it ties very well into we're strapped for, we're apathetic from fatigue because it's crushing. Now, if we look at it like how our parents had it and our grandparents, they'd be like, you guys are just tinfoil kids. We work 75 hours in the cold, uphill, bare feet the whole way. We didn't have spare time, those 2 weeks in the summer where we took all you kids with us? I'll turn the car around. But we've grown accustomed because we're white, we're privileged, we live in paradise, we have some money, and we can't understand how come those single moms, that community leader, why can't we all, that guy that runs the Save On, and people are trying, but there's no crocheting the society back together because everybody's exhausted. You'd have to pick everybody up, pep them up, educate them, keep them going, run to the next one. This is exactly what I did for 13 years, to try to get people to understand what's happening in the climate. Interesting audiobook to give you a sense of where you're coming from and where you're coming from. Machination, the industry of the society, and what's happened 100 years later is something called Caesar's Last Breath. And it's a remarkable environmental aware way to say, you have to do it in pieces. It's really good, but it's thick. But it's a very good way to understand what's happening and where can you, in your relationship to the earth, it's bloom where you planted. What else can you do? This is why I think you're fundamentally important. Maybe it will be you who unites, like Loretta with the rain barrels, you with going to environmental talks, me with my background knowledge, you with your sonnet voice. Maybe there's a way. I haven't seen it yet, but that doesn't mean we couldn't create it or try. There's a lot of smarts in this little
Yes.
triangle.
It's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
what gets me
I'll
is,
write down what
palm oil.
you recommended.
Right?
Palm oil.
The size of Rhode Island gets cut down to make way for palm trees every week in the forest.
Oh, gross. That's gross. And you never hear anybody talking about, and there's probably lots of products in IGA or wherever that have palm oil.
Because what's important is what you said and what Laurel said. The economics of keeping this machine going are so much more important
Yes.
to the people that are making the money, mostly crown, white, male, let's just say it.
Yep.
Okay? And they're not going to, willingly give over their lush life, reconvene the whole box. It would take an uprising like Iceland to go against it. And who's got the energy for that? Maybe there's a way. I haven't seen it yet, but that doesn't mean we couldn't create it or try.